Hi, everyone. I'm Tish Conlon, and I have an amazing guest on my podcast, TishTalk, today, Tom Marazzo. Now, for those of you who don't know Tom, he is an amazing man, has contributed so much to our freedom movement here in Canada. Tom was in the military for many years, I think up to 2015, and rose to be a captain. He was actually then retired and taught in college level, right, Tom, for a number of years, and was actually fired, right, for questioning the experimental shot and the mandates. Good for you. And from that, amazing that you were fired, Tom. I'm so glad because you have done so much for our movement. Tom is the face that is known from the incredibly successful Canadian Freedom Convoy. We're going to talk about that today, why it was so successful, and follow up to that. And since then, since the convoy, Tom has stepped up again to run in our provincial election, such an important election. He's running for the Ontario Party and Peterborough, right, Tom?
Yes.
Welcome.
Yes.
So tell anything I missed there in this amazing intro that you wanted to tell the audience.
No, I like the characterization of being fired. I mean, nobody likes to get fired, but I suppose a lot of good came from that. So that's okay. That's okay.
Absolutely. My guest yesterday was fired from City of Toronto, and she started the business she's always wanted to start. So, these are nudging us in the direction maybe we're supposed to be in.
Yeah, and I hear that all the time, is that out of the ashes of being fired, a lot of great things have actually happened. And I know several people that were in mainstream media, and they've lost their jobs because of mandates or supporting even the convoy. And what have they done? They've gone on to start their own podcast or their own shows and partner up with other people, and they're more free now to actually tell news instead of invent it.
Exactly. Well, same happened to me because I own a recruitment firm, refused to work with a company enforcing the mandates. And I do soft skills training. And when I said to a group of 1,500 people in an international company, could we have done better with our response to this, pandemic? And here's some of the things that were wrong. That was the end of that. Illegal. And here we're suing you as well. So, but that didn't scare me. So it is freeing. It's very freeing, and the important message you've inspired so many people to stand up, speak out, and that's the way we're going to get our country back.
And it is something. At this point, I've been invited to some great events along the campaign trail, and it's not always about the campaign. But it's not also always about the convoy either. But anytime that I get a chance to speak to people, they say, what do I do now? How do I wake up people now? And, it's a great question, because it's not an easy thing to do. And so at this point, what I've started to say is, you know what? We've been extremely patient for the last 2 years. We've been extremely tolerant. We have been respectful of those that are living in fear, and some that are legitimately concerned about their compromised immune systems. We've been very tolerant. We've been marginalized, and we've been called a lot of names for doing the best that we can to express our version of the truth that is going around. And we've really taken a huge beating for that. And what I'm saying now is, you know what, we've paid enough. We have paid our debt to all of this stuff that we really should have never had to pay to begin with. Now it's time to start having uncomfortable conversations.
Absolutely. I know Peter, I don't know if you know Dr. Peter McCullough. He's an amazing and brilliant cardiologist. I think one of the most published in the world.
Yes.
And he was in a Senate committee recently and stated very clearly and has published this in a peer-reviewed study that it's conclusively been proven that the lockdowns not only never worked, but they were never supposed to be implemented. They were advised against. And the only thing that should have ever been done is to isolate those like the elderly and protect them. And there's no such thing as asymptomatic carriers, which is a complete lie. So no one else should have suffered. No one else should have been penalized. And that has caused such not only mental, the horrific mental abuses, and we have a mental health epidemic
Yes.
right now because of that, but financial loss, massive financial loss, and just the whole social collapse because of that. So yeah, I absolutely agree. It's time to speak the truth loudly and stand tall and make sure this never happens again.
Yeah.
And
yeah, people need to find their moral courage and to be bold.
Absolutely.
And to get the evidence, be prepared to have a difficult conversation. And I think, I don't want to say scripted, but when you know and understand and believe in the evidence in the position that you hold, then the truth is very easy. And you can speak about that with absolute certainty, confidence, and conviction. But we have been marginalized, and we've been shy because we weren't sure of the evidence that we were basing our argument on. And a lot of times I have a feeling that something is wrong, but I don't know how to articulate what is wrong. And I said to a friend of mine 2 years ago, at this point, 2 years in, I'm fully confident in the evidence that has come forward to the public. The public just to be willing to consume it. So, and you raise a couple of really great points, because when we were at Woodville a few weeks ago, the subject of the elderly had come up. And I had commented about something called Emergency Management Ontario. And you see, I had kind of taken for granted that other people knew what EMO was. And the reason is because when I was posted to Toronto at the Army Commander for Ontario's headquarters, they had somebody who sat beside me in the morning briefs with the Army Commander. And his job was to be the liaison between the military and the civilian organization Emergency Management Ontario. And their job, and I actually I called it up as we were just before we were talking.
Yes,
I'm going to read to you. Yeah,
a lot of people might not be familiar with what this means and what the implications are. I know who didn't go to Woodville. Yes, this is so important.
It is vitally important. And there's a man. He's a retired military officer. Also, his name is Lieutenant Colonel, retired, David Redman. And there's a lot of videos going about Colonel Redman, because in the early days of the pandemic, within months, he was speaking out and saying, "What have you done?" Because he's retired and was no longer working for Emergency Management Alberta, but he had been trying to contact EMA and Jason Kenney, and he was getting ignored, almost like actually stonewalled from gaining access to these people. And there's a great interview that he had done where he said that he tried to contact, because he was the head of EMA, and he called them and they said, "Well, since you've retired, a lot of things have changed," which is completely not true.
So let's just take a few steps back for people who might not get this. So this emergency, what's it called? Management
Ontario. All the province.
So was it developed and had an outline of what should be done in a pandemic emergency, and then nothing like that happened, is what you're saying?
Yeah, and so the very reason that they exist, and I've got it on my phone here, so I'll have to look away from the audience for a minute, but it outlines, an overview of what it is. It talks about individuals, municipalities, and then the province. And it says this, it says Emergency Management Ontario coordinates emergency management programs in the province and to ensure the implementation of all municipalities and provincial ministries. A municipality or a ministry may reach out to EMO for advice on their program at any time. But you can read it. I'm not going to read the whole entire thing, but it's an organization that exists in every province. It exists to coordinate all emergency response plans on behalf of the premier or the government of the province. Wow. So look at it this way. EMO is the hub of a wheel. They are the coordinators for all of those spokes to make that wheel run. What has happened in this province and right across every other province and territory in this country, as well as at the federal level, they've taken the chief medical officer spoke out of the wheel, got rid of the hub that was EMO, and they put that one spoke in charge of the entire wheel.
Unbelievable. And you see that
Yeah.
happening. The powers given to these
Yes.
individuals, these bureaucrats,
Yep.
is definitely so concerning. Yep. And then also you see their links to, pharmaceutical firms and other things. Yep. It's very suspicious.
Yes.
So not only did they not follow what was outlined, should have been a proper response, but they went almost the exact opposite, didn't they? I know you spoke about going into a long-term care home, and can you talk about that? What they analyzed, and then what they didn't follow anything.
Well, EMO in Ontario, and I know this for a fact, because during the G8 G20 summit in 2010. EMO was fully integrated into the planning cycle that the military and the police used, or the government of Ontario to help with the summit, because it's a province-wide event, because it consumed military and police jurisdictions. Five police jurisdictions were involved in that. So EMO had a role to play in that. And like the military, they also use something called the operational planning process. That's what we use in the military. That's what EMO also uses. So this, the military and EMO also has contingency plans. So, for the military, we called ours Op Laser. And when the pandemic started, Ontario activated Operation Laser, which was our pandemic response plan. I know about this plan because I had to review it when I was posted to the headquarters in Toronto in 2008. And EMO has their own contingency plans for things like fires, for floods, for snowstorms, for pandemics, or even influenza outbreaks. So these plans are on the shelf and they're reviewed annually. But you take the plan and you reanalyze it if there is an actual current event that takes place. And this pandemic was the event. And so what they would have done is gone through, pulled off the contingency plan off the shelf, and then started doing an operational planning process or an OPP cycle. And what it would have done would have analyzed the cost benefit analysis for the province of Ontario. It would have taken all of the best practices from around the world, including data collected from the World Health Organization. And in that, because we had SARS-1, and I think that was in 2003, 2004.
Yes, right.
So we had a lot of lessons learned from that, which was used to update all the contingency plans. Then the World Health Organization, they were dealing, I think, in 2014 with an Ebola outbreak in Africa.
Right.
So we have these things that exist, and every time an event comes to conclusion, you do a lessons learned, or in the military we call it an after action review. So all of these things are done so that you can update your contingency plans so that they're current or valid. So this was all done, and yet, two of the recommendations that came out of the last round were: do not mask. Do not mask your people. It has no effect. In fact, it does more harm than good. That
Absolutely.
was a recommendation from the World Health Organization. The second thing was, do not lock down.
Yes.
Do not lock down your population. And here's the issue. When you lock down your population, you disrupt your economy. And why is that important, not to disrupt an economy? It has nothing to do with saying, lives are more important than making money. That's not really what the issue is. If you look at when there's an economic downturn, there's actually a correlation between, inflationary pressures or economic pressures, recessions, and suicides.
Absolutely.
And depression.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And if, people thinking who might be questioning, well, I think lockdowns work, you can use the rationale, well, why would you just lock down the small independent businesses? and support,
Yes.
let the big globalist businesses who've
Yes.
signed up members of the World Economic Forum stay open. So you look at the glaring, it doesn't make sense. It's not rational and it's not reasonable.
Yes.
And we know that it doesn't work. And Canada was one of the worst, I wanted to add to your list, in early treatment, because we know that particularly with this particular advice, that it's conclusive now, and Dr. Peter McCullough spoke about this. You can get people on simply on zinc, vitamin D and vitamin C early, helps to mitigate the progression of the virus. So you can go from like a 10-day symptomatic to 3 days, and also reduces the load. So it helps people avoid hospitalization. And let's not even talk about what happens once people get into a hospital. It's like you're signing up for a death sentence with the respirators and remdesivir, with a 25% fatality rate, kidney failure. I mean, it's unconscionable what's been done, and against, as you say, the actual guidelines that were created.
Yes. And then you look at, just when they break it out, the effect of COVID on certain demographics. So basically by age group. And we knew in the very beginning of this that COVID had virtually no impact on our youth.
No.
And it had a devastating effect on our seniors that had multiple comorbidities.
Yes.
And so what did we do? Instead of, to use a military term, putting a ring of steel around our retirement homes or our long-term care facilities and protecting the most vulnerable, and putting, almost like hazmat protocols in place to protect them and the staff and the families, but also doing it in a very dignified way for our elderly, which obviously at this point we know that it's been, criminal the way we have isolated and deprived our seniors in the last days of their lives.
It's so horrifically bad. And I don't know if this happened in Canada. You might be able to speak to this, but I was following the families, these horrible families in New York, who are now suing former Governor Cuomo for what he used to do. They had a policy put in place is if anyone from one of these long-term care homes had to go to the hospital for COVID and return, they weren't to report it, and they were to be allowed to mingle freely. It is so criminal. So they could allow people who are symptomatic to mingle freely with other elderly who some might be at risk. And COVID and deaths just skyrocketed because of that. I wonder if we did that in Canada too. But and then not allowing a family member to even see their loved one because they didn't opt for a medical experiment is tragic.
Well, during Op Laser, when the military did get called into some of the long-term care homes in Toronto, I'd spoken to a reserve soldier that was part of that. He had gone into the homes and he said to me, those people did not die from COVID. They died of dehydration and neglect, malnutrition. And we hear the story all the time.
It's heartbreaking. Yeah, it is.
It is heartbreaking. And so, this is a problem is the fact that, we abdicated, Doug Ford abdicated his responsibility to the wrong person who was not equipped and I don't believe qualified to handle this type of an emergency at a provincial level.
No.
He had the right tool for the job, and he just benched them and ignored them, and he put an unelected bureaucrat, and he tried to sell it to the public that it was political suicide for him to go against his chief medical officer.
I saw that. Now, are you talking about Dr. Moore?
Yeah, Moore in the one that was before Moore took over.
And he's on the Pfizer board, I heard he is. Has some sort of very compromised position.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, the tragedies that occurred with our elderly, I think they're so bad, but they pale to the tragedies that have occurred with our youth. I mean, I have 2 teenage boys. Canada, I think Ontario was the most locked down province. I mean, more lockdowns than anywhere in the world is what I heard. I don't know if that's true. And our suicide rate, this is something we should all be ashamed of as adults, is our suicide rate for our youth is absolutely through the roof. Mental health issues, masking kids who are not even at risk for COVID, not even a virus that they have 99.997% chance of overcoming. The mask itself is causing so many issues, not only physical issues, breathing and bacteria buildup, but mental health issues. So when you can't see someone an all day in a mask, and I've heard that people now are getting plastic, they're reading plastic in lungs. It's so, the word is disgusting what's happened to them. And I don't even want to start thinking about the shot, that's experimental shot that they never needed. I know Peter McCullough said the only where you really would have felt the benefit of a vaccine, a safe and effective one, if it was safe and effective, is with those elderly population. Everywhere else, it is a big question mark. And I know they say even the efficacy, according to Pfizer itself now, is about 12% and wanes rapidly if it were to work. And that's not including all of the list of thousands of side effects. And the possibility of death, which could be there as well, and is happening throughout the world.
And another thing is, to me, is very disturbing, is the fact that natural immunity has been debunked. Natural immunity has always been, been the gold standard of virology. And back in the day, they used to have chickenpox parties. One kid had it, everyone circled around that kid, they all got it because they knew that natural immunity would occur. And so, how is it that the bureaucracy, the government, the medical community has turned their back on the cornerstone of virology and is basically saying, natural immunity is not an acceptable standard anymore? I understand this.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I'm a registered holistic nutritionist and health coach. So something I'm very passionate about human health. I interviewed Dr. Stephen Pellick on this podcast early on, and what an amazing man. He's in BC, also had to leave his position for not doing his own research, thinking critically, not getting shot. But he put together a clinical trial. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, through his company, and did a cross section of Canadians. I participated as well because me and my boys had COVID. We went on a trip early on, and after 2 years almost, we still all have robust antibodies after 2 years. And what he found out in his clinical trial, and this is all scientifically proven, is up to 85 or 90% of the population has had some exposure and has already gained natural immunity. That's the way viruses work. They're genetic material, and they're here to serve humanity. They communicate information to us. So we never needed these experimental shots. And the big pharma doesn't want that out, because that would ruin their profit pipeline. And we're seeing this exaggerated lesson in humanity of putting profit before people. Such a scale we don't even know what the ultimate repercussions in human life will be, because we're not through it yet.
Well, if you were to look at what is a vaccine supposed to be, it is, a dead form of a virus that is injected into the body to trigger an immune response, to trigger your natural immunity to respond to that, and therefore produce an antibody so that in the future you have a naturally acquired immunity. So why is it all of a sudden people are saying you need to get the shot because you're somehow going to not get natural immunity, which a shot is supposed to be injected into you to trigger a natural immune response? Like, the logic is so fundamentally easy and basic that the media and the government have used such a level of fear-mongering, brainwashing that it is literally disconnected people's ability. They're replacing fear with their ability to use their own logic and make a simple deduction about the foolishness of this argument.
Absolutely.
Vaccines, they exist to give you, or to trigger natural immunity. Now
Absolutely.
you're saying that doesn't count.
It's just mind-boggling. I have something that you may or may not be able to validate. I won't say who, but a contact, maybe a whistleblower, had informed a friend of mine that in the military, there's extensive documentation on how to brainwash a population. Brainwashing techniques. And he said, yeah, it's right there. He found it. And they're using these. They've partnered with psychologists and brilliant minds on how you can program the human mind. And it's trauma-induced programming. You get them traumatized, sort of hijack their critical thinking faculties with the flight or fear response. Then you propagate them over and over with the message. And then you realize they're not making rational decisions. They're not using critical thinking. They just kind of fall into this zombie state of accepting what they've been told.
And you've got to wonder, why is it that some of the population is susceptible, or highly, highly susceptible, and other people it has zero effect on? And I would also argue, like, that is kind of our friend Jack McClellan, who has been doing hypnosis for 40 years. Some people are susceptible, some people are not. I'd love to know why some are and some are not.
Well, one thing I found is people who have broken from the dependence model, like people who have their own business, who are entrepreneurial, who have faced challenges, have faced lies, have had to use critical thinking to survive. That is, as a general group, is more aware of sort of onto the con, let's say. Also, people who take natural health and look after their bodies, and not everyone though, but people who have understood how corrupt the big pharma is. They're basically like criminal mafia, and so many of these drugs are more toxic than whatever they're supposed to be treating. So, that's something I've been aware of, as well as our food system, how it's compromised with, the lie of the GMO. And I studied that in great detail about the lies of Monsanto. They actually have more lawyers than scientists because of all of the fights they have, is that they're selling us that it's a greater yield with these hyper sprayed crops, and it's actually a lie. So when you start realizing the big lies out there and all of these things, and it's all about profit over people, then you break from the system and you make your own choices. That's one area I found for sure.
And you know what, even to support that, I would encourage people to go and watch some of the Robert Kennedy Jr. videos where he's talking about the CDC specifically. Because the CDC's operating budget, 50% of their operating budget comes from the patents that they own on pharmaceuticals. And he's been fighting pharmaceutical companies for decades, right?
What a hero he is.
And he'll tell you, he's like, the CDC is a pharmaceutical company. They produce the science and patent it, and it gets sold so that they have an operating budget.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that needs to be reformed in all countries, is that these lobbyists then go into the government organization, then they move out, then they go on the board of the pharmaceutical companies. And it's this illusion that we have safety. And it's a big fat lie, just like a lot of things. I mean, the exciting thing about being alive in this time is that the meaning, our actions are creating the change. I mean, I've described it to a lot of people because I like to give hope, because people are so overwhelmed now. It's like everything is corrupt, everything is shit. And what does shit make? When you pile it all together, it makes the most beautiful compost for something new to grow. And that's what we're dealing with. The biggest pile of shit we've ever experienced in the whole world. So, and I applaud you for running in the provincial election. I know you wanted to speak about that as well, because it's so pivotal. And maybe describe, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that I know there's a lot. Number one, why did you decide to run? And what are some of the biggest challenges we're facing? Maybe let's just focus on Ontario, because this is your race.
And there are so many reasons why, so many reasons to do this. And in terms of challenge, it's kind of a little bit of what we've talked about, the fact that many people either are not aware of what's really going on, the bigger picture implications for them, or they just choose not to see it. It's too overwhelming for them to want to even, take their head out of the sand and,
Right.
and acknowledge this. So I get that. But you know what? Every day that I go out and I'm campaigning, or since the convoy, I go out and I meet people, and they say to me, I saw the convoy, I saw you, I saw other people. And that's when I woke up. And just last night, I met this wonderful woman named Tammy, triple vaccinated.
Mhm.
And she said to me, she had seen me on videos during the convoy, and that was the day she woke up.
Oh,
I
great.
don't, I can't specifically say
Yes.
which video it was, but, finally, and she said, right now she can't come forward because of her job.
Right.
She can't be out in the public. I said, you know what? Don't worry. People
Yes.
like me and people like you will be out in the public eye, but we need them in the background supporting us and helping us.
Absolutely. And just saying no, just saying
Yes,
no.
yes,
You know what? I'm so proud of you. And I tell you, as hard as it was for me to run federally at a time when it was even much darker,
yes,
I enjoyed every conversation, because those
yes,
one-on-one
yeah,
chances to influence people are, I think that's sort of the lesson for everyone, is instead of just getting together with your own, they say
yes,
collect with like-minded. No, we
yep,
got to go and talk to everybody. There's
yep,
that middle group that's wondering, though, that's
yep,
the group to wake up. You can't reach everybody, but you can reach some. And you
yes,
can't
yes,
expect always a good response. I spoke to one man at his doorstep,
yeah,
and he was screaming about the unjab need to be, all these horrible things, and they don't deserve going to the hospital. And I
yeah,
had stood strong in facts about the actual shot that he wasn't
yeah,
aware of, and left with him having a slight awakening,
yeah,
questioning.
yeah,
It wasn't a full awakening, but he was starting to question. Those are powerful, Tom. And I'm
yeah,
so,
yeah.
that's what we all need to do every day,
We do,
plant
we do.
those seeds, plant the
Yeah,
seeds. It's not
yeah,
like, I'm a black belt. So when I started out, it was like, wake up, they're out for us. And I'd send all these notes and come on, everyone. Thought
yeah,
everyone would get it. They didn't. But then I went,
yeah,
okay, after months and months, it was planting like a farmer, plant a seed
yeah,
calmly,
yes,
plant a
yeah,
seed, stand firm. They say, fuck
yeah,
off. Like, okay, you can't
yeah.
get mad at people either. It's like,
I
okay,
agree,
have a wonderful day. On to
agreed,
the
agreed.
next.
Yeah, and like what's really unfortunate is another big challenge is that Doug Ford waited until the very, very last possible day to drop the writ to call this election, because
Yes.
he disrespects Ontario voters so much that he doesn't want them to exercise their democratic rights to learn about other candidates.
Yes.
Because by waiting for only 4 weeks to give people an option to explore other candidates, he knows that it's harder for us to take donations for our campaigns. We can't put signs out. We can't do any of that stuff until he dropped the writ. So he waited to the very last day
He
to
did.
conceal the rest of us from public.
Scummy.
It is scummy.
Yes. I know it was fast federally, but I think we had at least 6 weeks. This is a real race for you. 4 weeks is
Yeah, it's
almost
basically,
nothing. Yeah.
yes, it's a 4-week job interview. And
Yes.
he really, in my mind, disrespected the voters beyond, well, no. I mean, he does it every chance he gets. And the other big challenge is, has shortened up the amount of time that we can all campaign, but the mainstream media is going to help him.
Of course.
They, right,
Yeah.
they're
The
going to
censoring.
ignore us. Yep, they will
Yes.
ignore us, absolutely. And as far as we're concerned, mainstream media, government-funded media, is on its way out. It's on its,
Absolutely.
and it is,
Absolutely.
yep,
It's
is,
done such harm to Canadians,
yeah,
fuel this divisiveness. I know, like, Sun Tzu, the art of war, is they've done this divide from within.
yes,
Divide the end,
yeah,
divide us so that we're fighting amongst each other and we don't even look up to see the horrible
yes,
things that they're doing to us. Look at Bill 100, which they snuck in. I'm trying to
yes,
educate
yeah,
even my friends or associates, people who really aren't following any of this, and the harm
yes.
that's being done by this bill. Can you tell, just in a nutshell, how would that affect yourself if you were to go back to Ottawa with the truckers?
Well, for one thing, elected or not, I will be back in Ottawa this June when warrant officer retired. Well, actually, he's still in the military. He's a reservist. When James Top, who's walking across Canada.
Oh, yes.
James is an old friend of mine. We did a course together in
Oh,
1996.
I'll be
And
there
he is,
too.
yeah, he is walking across Canada with the intent to meet the federal government. It's a walking protest.
Amazing.
I will be there for that when he arrives. And my other organizations that I'm lucky enough to be involved with, Veterans for Freedom, is sponsoring his arrival once he gets there. So there will be a phenomenal turnout from Canadian veterans, military veterans, and he arrives. There will be an expectation that the government meets him. If they don't, we're looking at, you know, our very peaceful legal response in case the government of Canada refuses to meet with him.
Amazing. I can't wait to be there too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I will be there with him. But now we absolutely do have to consider Bill 100 in our planning, because you know what? We're military. We will do our own operational planning process.
Right.
You know, we will absolutely do our own OPP cycles to figure out the best possible thing for a positive outcome for that event when it happens this summer.
Well,
I'm
I'm hoping that will be overturned. But you know, realistically, will that be overturned by then? And the potential for that, for people who aren't aware, is that, you know, under the guise of keeping Ontario open, is that what they called it? They could seize property from anyone even considering what is actually a peaceful, lawful protest that's part of our constitutional rights.
Yes.
They could freeze your bank accounts, they could seize your property, your cars, everything.
Yeah.
And
I think
consider you guilty with
no due process.
It's unbelievably bad. That's communism. That's what they did in communist countries. Government.
Yeah, it is the Emergency Act 2.0, but it's put a permanent law in the government of Ontario. So even for us with the Ontario Party, if we form a government this June, we will repeal Bill 100 immediately.
Excellent.
It has no place inside our legal framework. It does not comply with the Charter of Rights.
Absolutely.
So how it ever even made it that far is something of a mystery all on its own. You know, I've met with Brian Peckford, you know, in person and on calls. You know, we do email, we do Zoom calls with him. And you know, one thing that people have to understand is in 1982, when the Charter of Rights was enacted, every level of government in Canada was told, you've got 1 year to do a review of all of your legislation and make sure that it complies with the Charter of Rights.
Oh, wow.
So how is it that now 40 years into the future, we actually have new laws that don't comply with the Charter? You know, this Bill 100, it violates several of the sections of the Charter. And I think specifically Section 2.
Wow. I mean, Brian Peckford's such an amazing Canadian.
Yes.
He's what government should be, standing up for the people, standing up for our rights, constitutional law. And I know I'm really following his lawsuit against the government on the mandate and also, you know, stopping Canadians from getting on a plane because they're not signing up for an ineffective and unsafe shot. And I think he's got multiple claims for that. I spoke with Chris Weisdorf specifically about that recently. But what an incredible man who was part of building that in Newfoundland. And I'm so proud of him. He is truly one of our great Canadian heroes standing up for people. And I hope he can make some inroads. Repealing some of these
recently, you were at the dinner, the fundraising dinner for Veterans for Freedom, and Brian Peckford has actually agreed to come on as our honorary colonel.
Amazing.
Which is, you know, your military veterans or viewers would understand what that is, but every regiment or every unit across the Canadian military always has an honorary colonel and an honorary lieutenant colonel. And because we're a veterans group, we decided to keep with that tradition, and we asked him if he would become the first honorary colonel of Veterans for Freedom, and he agreed. And you know, one of the big reasons that he agreed to it is because one of the cornerstones that we're trying to do with Veterans for Freedom is we are actually trying to build a reputation that is unquestionable across municipalities in this country. So, for example, let's say, Rolling Thunder is a great example.
Yes.
We participated in that for one little function amongst a large group of functions that happened this past weekend in Ottawa. And we did Op Dignity, which was the laying of the wreath at the National War Memorial. And we were, very instrumental in organizing that piece, very like members of Veterans for Freedom.
Beautiful.
And the thing is, of all of the other incidents that happened, there were lots of clashes between police and the public. But it was the exact opposite with Veterans for Freedom and Op Dignity, because the police that we spoke to, and I personally wasn't there, unfortunately, so I don't want to take any credit for Op Dignity. I wasn't there. I was, supporting in the background. I couldn't be there. But I've got, because I'm on the steering committee with Veterans for Freedom, I got all the daily updates on everything that was going on. But we worked really hard to work with the city and to the police.
Nice.
And you know what? It paid off.
Wonderful.
Because
that should be a template for future, really.
Yes. Yeah. And so what we want to be able to do is say other organizations that want to have a rally or want to have an event somewhere, they say to us, okay, Veterans for Freedom, can you come and help organize it?
Oh, beautiful. I love that. Excellent.
And so now and I know it's a terrible analogy, but it kind of works. Any organization that we have a partnership with and they say, hey, we want to do an event, we kind of view them as like the bride and the groom. And we're the wedding planners.
That's great. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. And what we're trying to do is say, build that solid reputation that if, let's say the city of Ottawa, if they say, oh, it's Veterans for Freedom that are sponsoring that, we're good. Like that's
good.
to relieve their anxiety.
Yes.
And it's going to make them want to work with us because they know that we will be safe, responsible, and professional.
Wonderful. I love
it. That paid off for us because what I've been told, the interactions with the police was phenomenal for the Op Dignity event. And the police, the motorcycle unit for the police actually did a drive-by and saluted, the veterans during the event.
Oh, so that's such good news. I love to hear that. I mean, the audience would love to hear that. I mean, they can comment on that below, but that's amazing.
Yeah, and it is. And that's really one of the things that we're trying to achieve. And this is something that Brian Peckford said, we committed to him that we were protecting our reputation, but also his and his legacy.
Yes, it's it's so exciting and such an amazing organization. So let's get back to now the race in Ontario. I know you said if the Ontario Party wins, they'll repeal Bill 100. Hopefully, we won't talk about all the bills, but I hope as well you'll repeal C-67, the critical race theory, which that doesn't. We maybe don't get into that today, but that harms everyone, all kids. And it's really teaching the wrong ideology instead of we're all equal, we're all together. So I mean, I know there's a number of other really suspicious and dangerous bills coming through. What do you think are some of the big issues in Ontario? And do people know the Ontario Party with all of the focus, the lack of media attention on, let's say, the freedom parties, the parties who are constitutional? I won't even say freedom, but they're representing the middle constitutional law. Instead of, we have really all the other parties on really a far left agenda. You call them the uniparty. So it doesn't matter whether you vote, Liberals, NDP, Green, or Conservative. They all have the same agenda. And it's all quite harmful to citizens. It's breaking the law. It's not representing our constitutional rights and freedoms. Democracy, they're actually encouraging more censorship. And so really the two parties that are are classified as red are actually center parties. They're constitutionally focused, responsible government, holding people accountable and following our constitution. That's about as moderate as I can get. So we have the uniparty way on the left,
Yes.
harming people, and the science behind their harm on every front is clear, breaking laws, harming our kids, harming our elderly, and
Yes.
harming all citizens, harming our economy, harming people's health, physical,
Mhm.
mental, emotional. And then
Yes.
there's you guys. But the media isn't giving you guys the attention that you deserve.
Yes.
So, so what are, couple, I know there's so many, but a few that are really mean a lot to you in terms of challenges in Ontario and what you'll do if elected.
Mhm.
And how do you get people to become more aware of the Ontario Party and your role in Peterborough riding?
Well, definitely, we touched on a little bit. This is going to be not about mainstream media because, as I said, I believe they're on their way out. They have a poor viewership. Um,
Yes.
but it's people like you that are doing alternative media, and we have social media, and
Yes.
so that's really our ground game is getting out into the public, meeting the public in person. I did 2 events yesterday. I've got 3 things going on tomorrow. The schedule is extremely busy. We've got the signs out. We're doing a lot of stuff that way, but it's the social media stuff now
Yes.
that is really, really going to be critical here because we know we'll get ignored. But, even with that, the Ontario Party has actually made the Nanos poll. So
what's that? Just
yeah, it's so the sort of provincial election. Nanos has been polling in Ontario to see where all the parties have been. The Ontario
wow.
Party, in the very first poll,
Congratulations.
on the very first day, they're asking in their questions, because they're polling, they're asking questions about the Ontario Party. So we have made sort of the mainstream Nanos polling. And so we've seen the numbers of the Uniparty, but we're actually on there. Now, what's really interesting is we're still classified as other
yes.
in the poll. But when you look at the actual breakdown, the questions, because we have access to the questions, the Ontario Party is a couple of the questions that are being asked. So
that's amazing.
Yes, that's very positive for us. But you raise a great point. Like there's such a thing in political science called the Overton window, and it's basically a window between the left and the right, and it's a tug of war. And like you're saying, the Uniparty is so far to the left that it drags the right exactly into the middle. And I don't think you should be extreme. I don't think you should be so far to the left and so far to the right. I think you should be, as a society, a well-balanced society. You should be in the middle. So I'm really happy, that you described that we're in the middle because, fiscal responsibility, less government. But when you need a helping hand, you have to know that your government is there for you.
Absolutely. Yep. And we talked about this before we started the podcast, but since you've talked, you've raised this, it's important to say that words have been misused for so long. We're throwing labels on people. We don't even know what they mean. You say one comment and someone calls you a racist or an extremist or a conspiracy theory. And, instead of having a dialogue, I grew up in a family where we used to debate every weekend over a dinner table. And sometimes it's so fiery and different points of view. That's exciting in life. Bring it on. Have a mind that allows you to realize you're not always right. The media is not always right. That what you're learning isn't always right. Debate with people. And what we really need to understand is when we're talking far left, that can be totally state-driven, state-owned, communism, whatever you want to say. Is when the collectivism is so great that the state owns everything. That is historically led to absolutely tragic outcomes with the greatest genocides in our human history. And when you now say, which they're calling us, just because you go, you're looking for freedom, they call you a right-wing extremist. That label is ridiculous because radical right is anarchy, which is the exact opposite which you would advocate for with your training in military and all of the constitutional focus, myself as well. So that's total lawlessness. And that's absolutely not. That's the exact opposite of what we want. So we are right in the middle where we need to be balanced. Legal, caring for people, elderly and young alike, and everyone in the middle, empowering people and holding people accountable. And it's that simple. We have to stop using these false labels. Very hard.
and there's something that I learned about recently. I actually learned it on TikTok. I wish I could find her name. She did a great video. It's actually called The Fallacy of Relative Privation.
Oh, well.
And what this is basically is to say that you know, we often hear the term freedom, you know, and I get this question all, well, what freedoms have you lost, Tom? Right?
Yes.
And this is this thing, this fallacy of relative privation. And it is meant to say, well, what you think and feel or believe is not really true. It's not important because this situation over here is much worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so people use these, like you said, they abuse these the terminology and the phrases in the things to marginalize or minimize or completely shut out what you're trying to say. And a great example of that is you're a conspiracy theorist,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or that's misinformation. You know, we use these catchphrases to immediately shut down any attempt at respectful dialogue.
Exactly.
Right?
Absolutely.
Foil hat wearing person and all that kind of stuff. Like we use those because, you know, the people that use that kind of language against people that actually have the facts, they don't have the facts on their side, but they have these wonderful catchphrases that they can use to immediately shut you down and discredit you.
Well,
Like
yeah,
the word debunk. The word
it's
debunk
true.
is in it, right?
I mean, I've been training in soft skills mastery for years, and one of my modules is cognitive biases. So I caught it really early on, and I actually did my own little experiment last year when I started to try to communicate what was happening. And, you know, obviously being concerned for all my friends and my loved ones and family and extended family, the dangerous data on the shots. I don't like to call them vaccine because they aren't. And I started tracking. There was like 7 cognitive biases, and it was so weird that there wasn't anything else that I felt they were being brainwashed. Is there some sort of something going on? But there was right-wing extremists. What's happened to Tish? She's crazy. You know, conspiracy theorist. There was show me the evidence. There was just immediately blocked with
Follow
no
the
conversation.
science.
And a lot of people said to me, "Are you okay?" And I'm thinking, my whole life, I've come in through, I've performed, I've been like moderate, conservative, caring. I've got I've written a book, I've spoken, you've trusted me for what, 40 years, and now you just won't even listen. I just think they were so blocked with these cognitive biases that this the ability to brainwash people has been achieved.
Yes,
and,
yes.
It's breaking through.
And I believe a large part of that was because the problem is so overwhelming for people that they don't want to confront it. They literally just want to turn a blind eye. And you know, beginning of the year, somebody on social media said, what is the one thing that you've learned this year? And my response was, you know, that the people that I believed would have stood up in 1932 against what happened in Germany are not the people that I thought they would be. They've completely fallen for the same thing that would have happened. They would have fallen for it back in the 30s as well. You know, in history later, we've got the benefit of hindsight, and we'd like to believe that we would have stood up against, you know, what happened in Nazi Germany. But we're finding out is no, you actually wouldn't have. You would have probably rolled over and just complied.
Well, you bring up something, you know, as we know, history, and without truth, real truth coming out, history just keeps repeating itself.
Yes.
A lot of history is written by those who are victorious. And we're living in a world where, you know, I don't know if you watch Who Owns the World Monopoly, but very few organizations actually own everything from the media to big pharma to banking. And so they have enormous power and clout and have had it for many, many decades. And so they've pushed this narrative, and we realize now we're waking up in the last few years, but this narrative has been pushed for more than just the last few years, for decades and decades. And so we have to start questioning the validity of a lot of things, why we participate in a lot of these wars. And as a military person, I think it's important for the military to get to the truth about how these wars were initiated, why they were truly initiated, so that they can serve and protect their countries without falling into traps of fighting wars for, you know, these globalists. who just
Yes.
want more money and they don't care about their lives, you know?
No, they don't. And I would never allow my two children to join the Canadian military.
No,
Never.
me neither.
Because
No.
I would never accept the fact that their lives would be put into jeopardy for corporations.
Exactly. And yet, when I went to this military event, I met some of the most honorable people I've ever met. And I realized everything has a purpose. They went through some of those severe hardships, and I know some of them spoke, as including yourself. And what it's given them is they have now developed that courage and the skill set needed to help Canada. And I think this is the most important fight we'll ever have. It's more important than anything, because this is truly a fight for our freedom. Some of the other wars, there's a lot of evidence showing that there were other factors at play here, other globalist interests. This is truly a pure fight, almost a spiritual war. This is a truly good fight. And I'm so proud of all the people who are participating legally and lawfully. It's not going to be an armed fight. It's a fight with words and a fight for people's minds and hearts so that we can build a better country and stop this corruption. Absolutely. Well,
so you know what? I left the convoy, we didn't get the mandates lifted. A lot of people got hurt. A lot of people went home and said, okay, I'm going to take a few days off and then I'm going to regroup. And that's what a lot of us have done. This is where Veterans for Freedom have come from. And even myself, like me, Bridget, and Vince, 3 candidates for the Ontario Party, I worked with them every day while I was in Ottawa. So that was chapter 1. Chapter 2 is going to be this provincial election. And if you look across, population, provincial population, Ontario is by far the largest populated province in Canada. We have 14.57 million people in this province. We have more people in Ontario than BC and Quebec combined.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so when you look at this, and you look at, Doug Ford, who's supposed to be a conservative, which he's not. He has really become a liberal, and he's become the lapdog of Justin Trudeau.
Absolutely.
So if we
disgusting.
If we can take away Ontario from Doug Ford, we effectively take away Justin Trudeau's lapdog who's running Ontario. So this is the first domino. I mean, mind you, it is a David and Goliath domino.
Yes.
But if we take away Doug Ford's power, we also take away Justin Trudeau's power, because Justin Trudeau gets elected based on Ontario.
Well, I mean, I even see, because this is something I wanted to mention to you, because it is a David and Goliath battle. But a win of even getting a couple people in, I think would be enormous. So will the Ontario Party form provincial government? That would be an amazing miracle. But even to get a few people in who can stand up, I know both with the New Blue and with the Ontario Party, having Rick and Belinda speak up with courage and with factual evidence has an enormous impact. And we did talk earlier about the problem of courage, and I have done that as well. I train people, and as a martial artist, I've always pushed through my own fears. We all have fears, but so many people, whatever it is, saying the truth, confronting someone with a conflict or whatever it is, trying something new, they lack the courage. The fear is so overwhelming. So when you see 1 or 2 people standing up with courage, speaking the truth, that is so contagious, and it motivates other people to do the same. So, even getting a few people in from the freedom side, the constitutional parties, is going to be a huge victory in my view.
Yeah. And there's a great YouTube video. It was from a TED Talk about 11 years ago. And I'd seen it years ago, and I've never forgotten it. I've shared it recently with people. It is it's an outdoor park, and there's a whole group of people at this park. And one guy gets up and he dances. So it's a TED Talk. And the guy showing the video on the TED Talk, it's about leadership. And the first guy gets up and he's dancing for several minutes all by himself. And then one other person gets up and starts to dance with him. And the person giving the TED talk raises the point. He says, you know what? The first person to get up and dance actually wasn't the leader. It was the second person that
Oh, interesting.
was
Yeah.
the one who gave everyone else permission to
Mhm.
join. That was the true leader, was the first, not the first. He started the ball rolling. It was the second one who had the courage to jump on board. And that's when everyone, and then the entire park erupts into this dance. And
Yes.
so, you know, maybe we don't form government. We're going to try our best, but we need just to get that second person to get up there and for people to take notice. And then the rest will join, you know, we
Yes,
will
they will.
grow. We will grow.
Absolutely.
And
I
for
believe
us,
that with all my heart.
the
I
magic number
know.
is 8. The magic number is 8.
Is it 8 people?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, we want as many as we can. We want to form a government. We're in it to win
yes.
it. But if you get 8 in Ontario, you get official party status.
Oh,
See, Liberals don't have that.
no.
When Kathleen Wynne got decimated in the last election, she dropped down to 7 elected members. They had, you know, Liberal domination for about 15 years or so under Dalton McGuinty, then her. But when she lost big, and she actually didn't have enough to qualify as an official party anymore.
Really? I didn't know that. That's fascinating. So all these people are conservatives who are doing nothing in our provincial legislature. That's so shameful. They're conservatives and they're not doing anything, not speaking out or standing up. They're truly shameful.
Yeah, look at Bill 67, was written by an NDP member of provincial parliament, and it was supported by the Liberals, and it was passed through law by the
Andrea
Horvath.
Yes.
I don't know who wrote the legislation for Bill 67, but it was written by an NDP MPP, and it was supported by the rest of the Uniparty, and it was pushed through by Doug Ford. Right?
It's so disgusting. Part of how they do that, and we've talked about how they use words against you, and this is something they're brilliant at, is it's always under the guise, the title says almost the exact opposite. So it's saying, look at the title. If it's something really fluffy and nice, it's got some awful stuff in it. It was something about equity in schools.
Oh, yeah.
And really what they want to teach is, you know, to judge each other and shame, teach you shame for your skin color and your past and all of this stuff, which is wrong and hateful.
Yeah, even the phrase anti-racism, which on the surface sounds like it's a really good thing, it's actually racist.
Yes.
What it means is, in order to be against something, you have to have an oppressor.
Yes.
So in the context of anti-racism, what it means is you've got somebody who's a victim, but you also have somebody who is the victimizer. And it turns out under that legislation, the only ethnic group that is not mentioned as somebody who needs to be protected are Caucasians.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, you know,
male Caucasians have it the worst. There's 2 phrases only. Is your white trash or your white supremacist? Why can't you just be a nice white guy? You know, you're just a nice person who cares about people. And it's harmful to society.
Yeah, and this idea of white privilege, I find this to be unbelievably narrow-minded, inaccurate, false.
It's false.
I find
offensive. It's offensive.
Extremely offensive. Because, you know, I can tell you, you know, I worked for everything that I've ever earned in my life. And, you know, when I went through college the first time, we started with 70 people on the first day. When I was done, only 10 of us graduated, right? Then I joined the military and I went through all of my phase training, and then I served. I constantly had to prove myself to men and to women, constantly.
Absolutely.
And you know what? Never in my life has the pigmentation of my skin been a factor in the things that I've achieved in my life. Never.
Exactly. And I mean, I've run a recruitment firm for over 20 years, and I've had the privilege of meeting people from all over the world,
Yeah,
whether it's, people from former communist countries who fled for better life
yeah,
in Canada, people from India or China, Africa, and I've met all different people and all different skill sets, and I've always
yes,
put forward the best candidate. I don't care about the
yeah,
color of your skin. I
yes,
care about your character, your dedication,
yeah,
and your skills, and can you do the job, and we're all equal. We have to
yeah, yeah,
stop judging each other by the pigment of our skin. What
yeah,
all of us have committed atrocities in the past. There's atrocities committed black against black. There's in China, in all the countries.
yes, yes, yeah,
It's look at how many people, Caucasian people, were murdered during the Russian Revolution
yes,
and the Bolshevik Revolution and under
yep,
Stalin. I mean, we have to be aware of the history, so we
yes,
learn to never do that and look at each other as equal and accept. And that goes for women and men too. This has been another con job,
yeah,
putting a wedge between men and women. Even though I'm a strong woman and a black belt martial
yeah,
artist, I reject feminism, the whole feminist movement, because I
mhm,
love men. We are built for partnership. Men and
yes,
women are great partners, but we
mhm,
have to stop having this men are bad thing, men,
yes,
all this
yes,
movement.
yeah,
There are good people and there are bad people, and they come in all shapes and colors, and we have
yeah,
to encourage people to be the best they can be, have a moral
yeah,
framework with
yeah,
conviction. But
yeah,
all of this stuff is wrong, and it's
I
punishing
agree.
all Canadians. So I'm hopeful that this will be overturned as well. Not teaching our kids, indoctrinating our kids like a little, concentration style of communism,
Yes,
ideologies on the left. So
mhm,
teaching kids to debate, I think, will be a great step forward, and encouraging different points of view is what I've
yeah,
always done in my training.
yes,
So what else do
absolutely.
you think? So, I mean, we've talked about how important this election is. You don't have much time.
Mhm,
What would success look like to you if you were elected and
yeah.
say you've been in there 6 months? What are you going to have accomplished for Ontario?
Well, like I said, we're going to repeal 100, and we're going to actively take steps against Bill 67. The
Excellent.
challenge with Bill 67, we can repeal it, but it is now deeply rooted in a lot of the psychology within the education system. And we are fundamentally against the idea of schools focusing so much their obsession on indoctrinating children as opposed to educating them with life skills like reading and writing and math and science and stuff
Yes.
like that. So those are the law stuff that we want to repeal. We want to start taking better care of our seniors. We'd also want to pass legislation to make sure all of those unvaccinated people in the province of Ontario who have either been fired or laid off are immediately returned back to the workplace
Excellent.
without question. Without question.
What about our
So
mobility rights if you didn't
yeah,
take the shot? Is that
yes.
something,
Well, that's a
that's
different issue.
critical?
Yeah, because international travel or cross-border travel is a federal issue right now because it falls under the aviation. So that's federal. That's the Minister of Transport in this country. So that's a little bit more challenging for us at a provincial level. But the other thing is, and I've been calling for this and working towards this since my involvement in the Convoy. What I want to see happen is a full, open, transparent public inquiry into the government of Ontario, the actions of the OPP, the College of Physicians and Surgeons, and the licensing board for the nurses. I
Yes.
want to look at the executives at all the hospitals across this country. I want to look at what is going on. What were the steps that led up to the colleges and universities mandating all of these vaccines and getting in line,
Yes. There's a
right?
lot of corruption and
A lot
bribery
of
going on.
corruption, a lot of bribery. And I want this investigated publicly and
Good.
transparent.
Thank
And if
you.
it is investigated or there's a public inquiry, and if those inquiries reveal or recommend criminal investigations, then we initiate those criminal investigations.
Yes, it's
And
important.
then yes, because we cannot do a witch hunt. We must follow a civilized manner of doing this. But the only way this province is ever going to heal itself again, and we're going to stop the suicides, and we're going to fix our economy and get people back to work again, is there has to be an end goal of healing the damage that has been done.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And in order to heal, people have to have an understanding of the truth.
Yes.
It has
yes.
to come out, because otherwise, if we keep living a lie, we're destined to repeat our mistakes. And God forbid that we're ever put in a lockdown again.
Yes.
And I do fear for that, because of not only the small businesses I know, having campaigned in Durham and continued my work here, they're hanging on by a thread. Small businesses has been decimated.
Yeah.
But also our kids, you know, my children haven't had an extracurricular activity in years. I mean, how is this, how are we developing future leaders when, number one, they're being indoctrinated, they have no skills, and they're being isolated, and they're being told that they're bad, or that they're going to make grandma sick. What a horrible abuse that has been put on our children. I think even more than the elderly, they have been abused by these policies more than anybody, and harmed deliberately.
Yeah. Well, look at Tim Hortons right now. They've come out and said that their camp, the children cannot attend their camps unless they're vaccinated.
Well, unless they've signed up for an experimental shot that's already caused thousands and thousands of wrong kids. I don't know the exact number, but in Ontario, to develop a very serious condition with their heart myocarditis, which will shorten their life. And they never needed it. They never needed it. That's unconscionable. I know. I will not buy a coffee there ever again.
I think I'm done with them as well.
Absolutely. Well, we need to put our money where our mouth is. One of the people always say, what action can I take? Well, I canceled my Disney. When you're pushing this sort of, we didn't talk about the gender ideology, but that's really, truly a disgusting to do, sexualizing children. And they crossed the line. I saw some of the leaked videos, and that was it. I'm done with Disney. And many people stepped up and did the same. And recently I canceled Netflix for similar reasons.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah. And I could get into that with you outside of this. But, and then when you start to live simpler and support your local people, even I say to people, subscribe to my, my show, because that really helps me. I've taken a strong stand. I don't have the income I had because my business, I took a strong stand. I was sued. I had 25,000 followers on LinkedIn, and they deleted me. But you know what? It's building up back quickly, because people are hungry for the truth. So I'm not remotely worried. I will be more successful than ever, but we can support each other with these little actions. Buy something from a friend who started a little business. Tell people about someone's little side gig that they're doing, because they're not working. Help each other out locally is huge. It's a huge step, and keep speaking up. These are critical things.
I've often been asked lately, what about municipal politics? Like, what about getting into municipal government? And I believe that's a great place to go.
Yes, that's what I'm considering. Yeah,
but not yet. Not yet, because municipalities are Ontario issued corporations. So if a municipality were to go against the provincial government, the provincial government could just dissolve your entire municipal.
Really?
Yes.
That's interesting, because I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people, I was asked to run provincially, as you know, and I've been thinking through what's next. I am still a PPC candidate for rep for Durham, but I was considering the municipal possibility, because I know it's coming up this fall.
But if the Ontario government gets in, then we're going to be able to create top cover for all of the municipal governments to finally push back. Now, there's a developing situation this week. The chief medical officer, Dr. Piggott in Peterborough, has sent a letter, and he's trying to team up with two other chief medical officers, one in Niagara and another location, trying to put pressure on the Ford government to bring back the mask mandates.
Yes.
What could you possibly be thinking? Like,
you know what?
It baffles me. Like, this guy calls himself a doctor, and he is on the absolute wrong side of the scientific evidence.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because this is a working example of what people can do. And
Yeah.
I wanted to tell you that in Durham, because I've been active, as you know, pushing back against a lot
Yeah.
of these things, people who don't have, maybe they don't feel, they're a little nervous, I can be their shield, because I go after
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
But what's happening is they're using these other people to bring back these coercive things. The mask for me is a symbol. It's a symbol of compliance and fear.
Yes.
But we know
That's what it is.
it doesn't work, and it's actually very harmful to health. And that's why
Yes.
I step into a lot of these things. In our own region, what they did when more was coerced from some of our pushing back, and that's the only reason why, to lift the mask mandate and follow the real science. He handed it to the school boards, and then they had an emergency meeting in Durham to try to keep the kids masked. Can you believe it? It's just unbelievable. So we got a group of us together with some of the data from some of the experts, as long as pushing and threat, even I would have been willing to pursue legal action at that point, because I'm so upset they did that to our kids, and they backed away. It was 6-3 votes, 6 of them, because we said, you do this and you're not following the science, there's going to be repercussions. They backed away. But that's why we have to speak up and speak loudly. And so kids in Durham aren't wearing masks, but kids in other areas where parents or candidates who are politically involved didn't speak up, they're still wearing masks. So every step of the way, we have to be on them. We have to push back, and where required, I think legal action needs to be taken, whatever it takes legally to stop this.
Absolutely agree. It does more harm than good, and we knew that 2 years ago. And yet these so-called experts, who I don't know where they get their actual credentials, they're not following any of the current lessons learned from any of the other events that have happened in terms of virology for years. And you know what? As far as I'm concerned, it's based on fear. It's based on fear. That's all it is.
Yes.
And children.
And lies. Fear and lies. Fear and lies. I remember Simone Gold, I think right in the beginning, amazing woman, doctor in the US, frontline doctors. She said the level of lies was beyond anything they could imagine. The bribery, the money being used, like even fake studies in The Lancet, which is the most prestigious magazine in the world, a fake study about, I think it was either hydroxychloroquine. I think it was that. And so it people got a little bit turned off. It created enough fear that people moved away from a safe and effective drug. And similarly with ivermectin, we know what they've done to blast that. Safe and effective, won a Nobel Prize, been treating safely for more than 50 years. You could give it to a child, not even worried. It's safer than, I think, Tylenol for outcomes. And yet, now instead we're being forced to take in a medical, be involved in a medical experiment, which is with the most dangerous drug ever pushed on humanity.
And you know what? People need to understand that in Canada, in America, the Americans call it emergency use authorization. Canadians call it an interim order. The legislation on that, why they're allowed to give a medication that is in its developmental or experimental stages, to give it to the public and bypass the clinical trials, is under the condition that there is not already an effective or safe treatment. That is why ivermectin, hydrochloroquine, and all of those other proven, like you said, Nobel Prize proven treatment and intervention has been suppressed by the media and actually outlawed in Canada. You can't prescribe ivermectin. So here's another issue for me. It is vitally important to me that the Ontario Party, if elected as a government, investigates the College of Physicians and Surgeons, because you know what? I asked a good friend of mine who's a doctor, and who's lost his job because of the mandates. I said, does the college have a big R&D wing of their organization? He says, no, they're not. They get involved as a licensing board to police the conduct or address complaints from a patient from the doctor. And they're not an agency that deals with new science and new medicine or treatment. They are an agency that deals with really policing the doctors. So my question was, what in the hell are they doing inside a treatment room when a doctor and a patient are discussing medical intervention or treatment? Why is it they're threatening doctors when a doctor is saying, I have this proven science from the United States and other areas like Tokyo? In India is giving care packages of ivermectin and vitamins to all of its citizens in one of its states or provinces.
I've seen that. Yeah,
So,
little package. Yeah,
yes,
cost them $1 or something.
nothing. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Pennies.
how can these people claim that they're not doing any harm?
It's unconscionable, and
It
I mean,
is.
the logical conclusion for anyone who's using even a speck of their critical thinking faculties is that this has been done deliberately and done to maximize harm. I met a doctor, I won't even say their name. I spent a lot of time in Ottawa as well, and I had the privilege to speak on Parliament Hill. And she said that these people actually broke into her practice and stole a lot of her patient files where she'd given exemptions for a medical experiment. And she's an elderly person. She said, I don't need this anymore, but no one else, my younger peers won't stand up. They're too afraid. So she said, I hate every second. I'm fearful. I'm even afraid for my life, she said. And yet, she said, I have to do this because it's so horribly wrong. And she has to uphold her Hippocratic oath. It's a crisis of courage, I believe, because if all the doctors, number one, if they've been given proper information, I know a lot of doctors I try to break through won't believe me because they're given improper information from the government. It's all lies. But number two, those who even have a glimmer or are seeing the adverse events, they need to step up, encourage, and honor their Hippocratic oath. I don't buy it when people say, well, yeah, I've got, a mortgage or this. Doesn't matter at this point. Be prepared to lose. I've lost. I stepped into this fully and have lost, I'm not going to say quite a bit, but I have no regrets because I know being on the right side of history, it'll all come back. But people have to stand up and speak out, honor their Hippocratic oath. And I think it starts with the doctors.
Yeah. And you know what really, really is quite disturbing about Doug Ford is he came out publicly and he said, going against your chief medical officer is political suicide.
Yes, I
saw that. You know what I heard when he said that was, I don't care about you, Ontario, in doing the right thing. I care about me and my career.
All I care about is my job. How many kids have died because of him? How many elderly people have died because of him?
Absolutely.
I know his own daughter speaks out against him, and I'm, good for her. Because she knows what he's been doing is just been so horrifically harmful. And the harm people, unfortunately, are just waking up to, as more and more. It's through adverse events. More and more adverse events are being reported. I mean, even in my own town, they're all over the place. But unfortunately, people aren't connecting the fact they've just had a heart attack. They took their third jab and out of the blue, they've had a heart attack, a heart condition. They've been diagnosed with cancer. Cancer is up, I think, over 1,000% in many places. I know in Germany, an insurance company whistleblower who's been sort of slandered and silenced reported massive increase in claims, all post jab. So we're just beginning to learn the damage that's being done to humanity.
Well, the data coming out of the U.S. military is seeing an 1,100% increase rate in death.
Of healthy males who never needed a shot. Isn't that what about Canada? Is there anything about our?
I don't know the data. No, they're tight-lipped about it. I don't know the data in the Canadian military, but it's just unconscionable to me that that people would choose their money, their careers over their professional oaths. But why would they? Why would they when the very people that are supposed to police them is actually pressuring them to violate their oaths?
Yes.
So the confusion amongst the even so-called professionals, and I use that term loosely now, is beyond measure. But these people are supposed to be, thinkers.
Well,
but they're not. They're just getting on board and following orders.
You bring up a great point. I've noticed this, having run, consulting firm for many years, and I participated in a number of CEO groups. I used to have 10 staff and, bigger organization working internationally. And even last year, I participated in a CEO group where I said, it's wrong to enforce a mandate for something experimental. It's going to harm people. It's going to harm your staff. It's going to harm society. And people looked at me as if, that's what's wrong with her. I was such a cold shoulder. You could feel it was palatable in the room. And it was like, for me, this was obvious. This is leadership 101. And yet the whole group thought what I said was so wrong. And a lot of companies in Ontario, including, bigger ones, enforce these mandates. And that's a crisis of leadership. Because again, putting profit before people. Oh, well, I don't want to upset my government contract or client. That's got to come back to bite them. In a bad way.
I know from my perspective, if we were to form a government and, there's these different ministries across the province, one of them I'm very interested in, in a perfect world would be to become the Minister of Education in Ontario.
I think you'd be excellent at that, to be honest. And having taught for many years, I think that would be an amazing role for you. Yes.
I would love to do it, because I would like to be the guy that pulls, this critical race theory out of all of our schools, implements teaching our youth critical thinking, ethics. Ethics must be taught
ethics. Oh, I love that idea. Yes.
And then the other thing is, we need to teach our students political science.
Absolutely.
And I'm talking more about governance, not the drama of politics, but the actual mechanisms of government. Because when they graduate high school, they're now voting age.
Yes, and we have to teach them about the dangers of communism, because that's not taught in school. And so they're being pushed in a direction where they almost feel this collectivism is the right thing to do, particularly when you combine it with the virtue signaling. You're doing it for the good of the environment, jumping on. We haven't even talked about the climate alarmism out there and the fake science behind that, that's trying to coerce us into what potentially climate lockdowns and our, the carbon tax and all these other illegal acts just to extract more money from the population.
Yes. Yeah. We have to learn about all of these things and actually put them into the proper context in which they belong. And that's another issue. And I've been discovering this, recently through a friend of mine who has been educating me on the terminology that we use. Because we're not so good. We try to make an argument, and just like I said before, we use things like conspiracy theorists and all that kind of stuff, and on that side of the argument. But on the other side, we things like carbon tax and all these things, there's a context to that too that I don't think we're great at yet. Me personally, I don't think a carbon tax is even remotely the way to go about doing this stuff. It doesn't make any sense. I've got a master's degree in business. Just from an economics point of view, it doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
No,
I have never been convinced that a carbon tax makes any sense.
Oh, it doesn't. And the interesting thing, I'm a passionate person for environment. And I follow regenerative farming. If we literally just changed our model and taught farmers about regenerative farming, and really capturing carbon in our soil. Our soils are almost sterile now because they've been sprayed to death. People have been told and lied to that, this Roundup Ready stuff's going to help grow your crops and it's going to give you more money. Again, it gives you more money. Yields actually go down. We're sterilizing our soil. We're getting toxic food that's giving us cancer. And if we have regenerative farming and we let the microbes, get back into our soil and then absorb the extra carbon and turn that into nutrient dense food instead of this sterile food that we're getting. We have lower nutrients in our food now than was in the soil than we got years ago. That's why people need all these supplements. So literally changing the way we farm, empowering empowering farmers, making sure they get a good living. They should be the
Yes.
doctors of the future as food. Food
Yep.
is really the best source of health and healing. And
Yes.
we wouldn't need any of these taxes. We would clean up our soil. All of the extra carbon would be absorbed. And Canada isn't a big polluter, and yet we don't.
Yeah.
We're one of the safest countries. I think we do. We're the most ethical producing oil in the world, and yet we're not near to our capacity, and we're importing oil from Saudi Arabia. I mean, let's just get honest with everything that's going wrong.
Yeah. I mean, we have the largest, one of the largest land masses within our borders, and the number of trees that we have, the number of the amount of oxygen that is produced just by Canada alone, and the amount of absorption by the same trees that provide the oxygen. It's not a perfect balance, but we as a country are not the biggest polluters in the world, right? We're actually, I think we're, but at the end of the day,
percent, I think, is what we contribute to the world. Yeah,
but at the end of the day, what I believe is we should always be, or aim to be, good stewards of our own personal environment and take responsibility.
Absolutely. That's what I agree as well. That's part of being this middle of the road like we are. Is it being a good steward if you just give over a few bucks, but then you're polluting and you're doing harm to your life and your environment, you're eating toxic food and you're supporting the toxic system? Or are you a steward? Do you compost? Do you, try to grow organically? Do you eat clean? You try to support organic and local farmers who are doing better. Those real action steps are what we need, not a tax system that actually promotes the corrupt model that we need to get away from.
You can't have 10 people in your neighborhood and 9 of them are composting and not using pesticides and taking responsibility and good stewardship of their own property. But the 10th person down the street who's polluting and doesn't care and using Roundup and everything, but gets a get out of jail free card because they have enough money to pay the taxes. Or the rest of us, the other 9 of us, have to actually pay a tax to offset the damage that this person's doing. Like, these schemes don't make any sense. They don't make any sense at all.
And this whole thing, we go on, and what we both realize is so many of the things, well, even if you don't want to go as far as they were done deliberately, they don't make sense.
Yes.
And one of the things we need is to have a great creative mindset to reimagine a better future, because we have to have completely new models built. That's the exciting thing. You got to throw away the past, new models, reimagine, re-educate. Even when you talk about lawns, because I wrote a book and I spent 2 years researching all of the foods and everything about our system to get a better system. And even you look at something as benign as a dandelion, we were told it's a weed, get rid of it, and yet it's one of the most nutritious foods in the entire world. It cleans out our liver, the roots, and the greens are so good for you. They're so full of all of the minerals that are missing in a lot of our diets. So this beautiful thing that's been put on the earth and detoxifies, which is what we need. It's like, hey guys, you are toxic, your body's toxic, and it's giving you a little message, maybe from heaven, and then we spray it with more toxins. I mean, we're doing the worst things all the time.
The worst thing we can do right now is to get rid of dandelions, because the bees, that's the first place that they go in the spring, is the dandelion, and that's where the pollination starts. Like, this is one of the best tools to attract the bees and to do the pollination if you plan on growing food in your own place.
Oh, absolutely. That's and I didn't realize that, because I actually, one of my goals later in life, once I'm through helping my country, is I want to be a beekeeper, and I want to do micro farming, mushrooms, and all these fun things. Once I've finished my job, which here in Canada, this is my most important mission, is helping on the team to get our country, get our this amazing free beautiful country where we are stewards of the land. We are, we have the ability to interact with each other with different opinions and still have dinner together. I
Yes.
know they've been doing this in the States, driving a wedge between the Republicans and the Democrats. But as I read history books and talk to different people, that wasn't always the way. They would be collegial. They would agree to disagree, but then they'd go out for dinner. And the system, and I think it's been done deliberately, worked harder and harder through the media and other channels to create these bigger and deeper wedges. And it was done in families too. I know millennials have been conditioned, and a lot of them say, well, I'm not talking to my parents anymore because they're racist or they're this, giving them whatever label. And it's like, that's your parents. Honor thy parents. They're different. They don't have to be the same. Doesn't mean they're racist. They're kind, good people. But putting these labels on people and creating these divisions and unfriend if I don't like your point of view is so harmful to society. We've got to get away from that as soon as possible.
At what point did we go from a respectful discourse to just an attack on the person? And I often try, I just want to focus on the issue. I don't want to attack the person.
Character assassination. Strong man technique.
Yes. And I find more often than not, it's about, I get attacked on a daily basis on social media, but I get way more support than I do the vile stuff. And
that's good.
It doesn't matter. The moment you attack me as a person, I don't care what your point was. You've now changed the situation where I don't even want to engage with you because you're just nasty.
That's true.
And I got criticized for a while because I was blocking people left, right, and center on my social media. I'm like, if you would have engaged with me in a respectful way to have a good discourse, I would have loved that. But instead you attacked me and called me all sorts of vile names as if somehow I'm entitled or you're entitled to abuse me because I'm running for a public office.
I applaud you for doing that. I think that's the right, and I think you have a good mind, and I think that's the important step to take, because if someone's not engaging civilly, they shouldn't be allowed in the conversation. And I think that's just a good line, because they want the comments to linger there to damage your reputation, to slander you, and you're not going to allow it. That's smart. I like that. You want to have a discourse and you don't agree, wonderful, bring it on. And I know Elon Musk even said that recently with his acquisition of Twitter. You step into the ring, I'm here, debate me. I think that's great for us. I think
I agree. But I just tune out with the issue that you're mad at me about. And I just kind of immediately start to say, well, you're no longer, worth my time. You're not going to degrade me. I'm not going to allow myself to be disrespected by playing your game and following along in your anger. Just for the bare fact that, I'm running as an elected official. It doesn't work that way. And I don't have to, I am putting myself out there. I am trying to make the change that I want to see. But, if you vilify me or you attack me personally and go after my character, then you're not entitled to engage with me after that just because I'm in an office. It doesn't work that way in my mind.
I think that's a great takeaway for people listening too, because sometimes they don't know what to do when they're getting attacked. And I think that's a great takeaway. So let's I know we could go on for hours. We've already gone on. I was just looking at the time. It's like, oh my God, this is, it's so interesting. There's so much to talk about. So, just to sort of finish up for today, I know we'll have to talk again about some of these other issues, but what could you tell people who are listening? And I have a large audience, even through some of the business groups I'm involved in. People who maybe say, well, I certainly don't want the Liberals or NDP to get in, Conservatives. So I like your message, but I'm voting Conservative. And then even past the election, what can we all do as practical action steps that are realistic to break out of the fear, to engage, so we can get work towards a better future for all people in Ontario and Canada.
And this is this kind of alludes to the vote splitting idea a little bit. I would say that if people are worried about the fact that well, if I look at you guys, or I vote for you guys and the PCs don't get in, that we might end up with a Liberal.
Yeah.
Or with an NDP government. And I find that logic to be fundamentally flawed.
Yes, me too.
Because if you say, okay, all of them, I'm going to put them into a big uniparty basket. What are my other alternatives? Because we're out here, we're all over social media, every last one of us. And, you know, we often call for people that come to see us speak at an event. We say, next time you come, just bring one new person.
Yes, perfect.
Just bring one new person.
One new.
Let us earn your trust and earn your vote.
Right. That's one person at a time. Yeah.
One person at a time. And that's what democracy is that you're not supposed to say, oh, I'm voting PC because my great-great-grandfather did. Right? No, the people that your grandfather voted for are not the people sitting in that office right now.
No.
It is the uniparty. They are all to the left.
All corrupt. I mean,
all corrupt.
At least if they're not all corrupt, and I speak for, you know, MPPs, is that they all have, they have their head in the sand. They're not doing the right thing for Ontario, and they're not stepping up to build a better future at all.
So Doug Ford has gotten rid of 4 out of 5 independent MPPs because they disagreed with him. He just fires them. So had the rest of them found the moral courage that they were elected to actually display, and all stood up to Doug Ford as a party, he couldn't fire the entire party because he loses. So he should have, and in fact, I think those MPPs should have replaced Doug Ford as the leader of the party, because
they should have.
And so every last one of them that kept their mouths shut, as far as I'm concerned, should be held responsible.
Me too. I agree, because you've been elected. That's your job. As a minimum, they should be replaced. They should be fired, because contributing to this harm, whether you were bribed or you were pressured or coerced or whatever reason, you knew it was wrong.
Yes.
You know, the harm has been caused. You did nothing. Shame on you. And you, as a minimum, you should be fired from that job. We should have a complete replacement, is what I believe. Absolutely.
Fired for a lack of moral courage and integrity.
Yeah. Well, I spoke with a lady who was fired from the city of Toronto for, guess what? For misconduct was the word they used. Misconduct, 30 years of exemplary performance, I'm sure, like you. Did her own research, decided not to take an experimental shot, and she was fired for misconduct. But basically, you didn't obey, so you're out. And that, you know, and yet the people who are obeying, they know it's wrong. They have to stand up. So well, listen, Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I mean, so interesting. We could go for hours.
We could.
I know the Woodville group is looking forward to this recording, and some of my other groups, and I'll post it everywhere. I'm building my audiences everywhere. So thank you so much. Good luck in the next few weeks. Please reach out. I'd be happy to come up and help door to door. I'm helping both parties on the freedom side. So all the best. And I'm sure we'll see you soon. We keep crossing paths in all these events.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Tish, for having me on.
My pleasure. Have a great day. Good luck. I'm rooting for you.
Thanks.